All right, time for the board there. Please stand for pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
5. All right, thank you. Happy everybody found their way back to the conference room here. Start off with minutes that were circulated Monday evening. Any questions? If not, thank you, Heather. Thank you, Gary. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Heather, you want to give a real quick, just a verbal update on where we stand from treasurer's perspective?
Yep. So we've signed 2 letters of engagement with Crow and Barnes and Thornburg, but we have not been invoiced for any services so far.
All right, thank you. Moving on, Mark, I believe you want to talk about moving some of our meetings to an evening.
Yeah, so just through a lot of feedback from the public, we wanted to get a couple evening meetings on the calendar. So we've got our March 12th and March 26th meetings. We're gonna basically kind of pivot our normal day meeting those days to a 5:15 meeting in the council chambers those days. We've got somebody to take notes or take minutes, and so just a little bit of coordination with the county to make sure we've got the right folks here that need to be here. And so March 12th, March 26th at 5:15 will replace our Thursday day meetings those days.
All right, Dr. Himsel, are you introducing today's speaker?
I will do the introduction part.
Yeah, feel free to come sit at the table when you speak. Podium's kind of in the corner over there, so make a little round table.
This is work over here. I also want to make it so you guys can see the screen.
Join the
Yes,
fun.
perfect. I'll answer
And all
anything
that.
sent on.
So first of all, thank you for the opportunity to present again. I apologize for not being here the last time. I think that we had other people who presented. I was watching and so forth from afar. Today, from that meeting, I understand that there are some questions regarding some of the legal aspects of how we can finance in schools. So with us today, we have Kristen McClellan from Ice Miller. She serves as bond counsel for many schools throughout the state of Indiana and has been serving as bond counsel in conjunction with Jane Herndon for many years with Vigo County School Corporation. So understands the history of where we've been and where we are and how we try to set ourselves up to move forward in that regard. Also with us today is Jason Dansel from Baker Tilly. Again, a long-standing relationship with the school corporation that I believe began when they were Umball and then got bought by Baker Tilly through a merger. So it's now Baker Tilly, but they also have history with the school corporation and understand where we've been, how we've gotten to where we are, and how to move forward. And he's going to present a little bit as to how do we come up with the amount of bonding capacity that we have. Keep in mind that our school board directed us to try to figure out what could we do and how much can be done within the existing rate and levies. So what you're going to present today is that we do have the capacity of doing more. But what our task was to find out what could we do inside what we already have in our existing rates and levies. So that's what they're going to present on. But I wanted to clarify that aspect of things. What we've been trying to do throughout this entire process, and the reason we made the ask of the county is because we're trying to figure out how much can we get done inside existing rates and levies without having to raise taxes on taxpayers. And that's what we tasked them to do, to find out what we could do maximally. The commissioners have done the same thing, and I think you guys are engaging with Crow to come back and check the county's work and find out what there is a belief of what they can and cannot do. But we understand if it doesn't exist, but hopefully there is, and if it is, we ask kindly that we figure out how to partner and take advantage of this as well. The other thing that they're going to share with you is how do we compare? That was also one of the questions. How do we compare with other school corporations? What you're going to find is that we're on the lower side of things. But I think that's going to bear out in the information that they have. We've been fiscally conservative as a school district. And when it comes compared to other school districts, you're going to find that we're on the lower side of things. That's a tribute to the work that Donna Wilson has done as our chief financial officer and her team to make sure that we're able to live within these needs, and we do live within these needs. But those needs are limited, and that's what puts the pressure points on us to try to figure out how do we move forward with all these different pressures which you've gotten in the last couple meetings, what those pressures are and where we can save money in these plans to be able to reinvest back in our kids. And that's what we're trying to do, is make sure that we're maximizing what we do for kids. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Kristen. I think Kristen's going to get us started.
Yep, good morning. Let me make sure this is working. Well, I should enter. Or maybe I'll do this.
There it is.
Maybe just have to email. Good morning, Kristen McClellan from Ice Miller. I'm glad that we're around the table because we really want this to be a conversation. We know that some of you had some base questions that you wanted us to go through, so we are prepared to answer those questions we knew about in advance, but also happy to answer any questions that these slides bring up or any other questions that you have. One of the first questions that we talked to the school corporation about is the understanding of the type of borrowings that school corporations can do. So one of the things that's been a misconception throughout the state, specifically in recent years with a lot of legislation, is what can schools do? What sources of revenues do they have to do capital projects or construction projects? So as it stands today, there are two funds that a school corporation has from which they can do projects. One is your operations fund, and two is VCSC's debt service fund. So I wanted to start at the top with the operations fund. The operations fund, as you may or may not know, I think you heard about this a few weeks ago, used to consist of separate accounts. So there was what we called a CPF account or fund. There was a school bus replacement transportation fund. And with some legislation, those all got moved into what's called an operations fund. With the operations fund, this is where schools do projects, or it could even be renovations and improvements with their cash. It used to be when I started my career 20 years ago also, many schools would do what was called like an energy savings loan out of operations. But what's happened over the years is that operations fund, after all the other funds were combined into it, has become extremely pressured because you have to fund transportation through that, you have to fund your salaries through that piece, and also the cost of utilities and insurance and those sort of things have gone up. So I would say in the last 10 years, I have done one financing from the operations fund across the state of Indiana, because again, that fund is pressured. So instead,
I'd like to clarify.
yes.
To clarify on the salary and wages, those are non-school personnel. So those would be your district office, that would be the bus drivers, that would be people who are not associated with an individual school. So I just wanted to clarify that.
And those are all paid from the education fund, which you could never have the power to do construction from either. That's why we're focusing on these two. Because of the pressure then on the operations fund across the state, most schools have turned to the debt service fund to do projects. The debt service fund is fully for a school corporation supported by property tax levies. This is different from other units of government. Other units of government may be able to do a financing off of proposed revenues that they will receive. Schools cannot. So unlike some units that could do a bond that's payable from lit revenues or backed by TIF, schools cannot do that. The only way they can borrow is through the debt service fund, which are property tax levies. Any questions on that?
This, the House bill that created this board and this unique opportunity, allows for the county potentially to bond the project. Can a county bond using lit funds and a school corp cannot?
That is correct.
Okay.
Counties have more options than a school corporation does. That is exactly right.
And how's lit revenue viewed compared to, say, property taxes? Because isn't that's the collateral for the bonds?
Correct.
So how's lit viewed compared to property taxes? And then even further, a potential like private partnership pledge from, we've heard the Casino Foundation.
My focus in my practice, and Jason's also, is on K-12 public ed, and we have other groups in both of our firms that focus on the other types of bonds, work directly with city, towns, counties. But I will say the pledge would be viewed as a bondholder probably very similarly, so that the ratings, the interest rate that they would pay would be very similar. But I can gather more information from you on that. But in my world, I wouldn't see that bondholders or anyone else would look at one as more risky.
Okay.
Because when a county, city or town does a lit financing, you have to have a lot of other verifications that the big utility team will do for them to make sure they'll have the revenue to support the bonds. Where a debt service levy is fully secured because there are laws out there that say you have to pay debt first. And so that levy, when they put it into their budget for a series of bonds, it's always protected and paid first. Yeah, great question.
I think where you're also going with that is property tax revenues are typically more stable than income tax because they're less impacted by the ebbs and flows of the economy. I think that's part of what you're asking for. But in terms of how the Standard & Poor's does the ratings, I think it goes back to more of the history.
Mm-hmm. Great question. Did it go? Okay. The other question we were asked is, when do they have to be on a ballot? And this has come out of, we had legislation in 2023, which for the first time said, like, Indiana became a forced referendum state for certain schools. And I wanted to make sure we understood that here today. It started in 2023 if the school corporation had a debt service fund tax rate of over 80 cents. That was in 2023, but I'm going to get to current law. The schools that had a debt service fund tax rate over 80 cents, any project they do would have to be on a referendum ballot. That was modified in Senate Enrolled Act 1 to 70 cents. And VCSC does not have a debt service fund tax rate over 70 cents. Many of the referendum that you've seen across the state, so this is one reason that a school would be forced to referendum, is if they were over 70 in their debt service fund tax rate. Another reason may be that a school corporation suffers so much in circuit breaker loss that they, even though they weren't required under this rule, they may have to force a construction project on a referendum ballot so that the debt service is protected and they don't get a lot of hit in their operations fund. So those are the two reasons when schools would have to be on a ballot. Otherwise, under current law, and I know tomorrow is the end of session, but as of today, those are the only two reasons that a school corporation would have to be on a referendum ballot. Any questions on that?
Just as a reminder, our debt service rate is 0.2.
I've got that one memorized. I've heard it enough.
That was more for the community members who haven't been maybe paying attention to all the other meetings.
Yeah, are we going to get to, or do we, I don't want to get too ahead of you, how that 0.2424 compares across the state?
Yep.
Perfect.
The other thing we know we had a question on is, what if we, instead of financing a large project at once, why can't we just do $6 million a year? And the reason is there's a state law out there that says when a school corporation, and I'm going to focus on school corporation, goes through the process for an approval of a project, that project cannot be artificially subdivided. And that is why we struggle a lot when we're doing these projects. I mean, even if we're doing an HVAC unit for a big building, we have to say to ourselves, we are not artificially subdividing this from anything else. And so what we look at to determine artificial subdivision, and there is no case law yet, but what it is that if one taxpayer thinks a school corporation has artificially subdivided, they can petition the DLGF. So even though the statute itself on its face doesn't say what an artificial subdivision is, and even though we don't have case law yet, what we do is we review the submissions to the DLGF across the state that have claimed that a project has been artificially subdivided. So what we look at to make that determination on everything we do at VCSC and throughout the state, we look at the fact and circumstances of the project. We look at how many sites are going to be impacted and the type of work. We look about the timing of when the work needs to be done, how it's going to be financed, and the different contracts. But I wanted to make sure we talked about this, but it's a state law as to why we can't do it over time. We have to go out and we can't artificially subdivide. Any questions on that?
Makes sense.
The other question we got is about a capital referendum ballot. And the ballots themselves are stated in state law. So there are specific statutes and they contain this language. If our school or any school would ever want to be on the ballot for a construction referendum, there are very few pieces of this language that we can change. So the only things that can be changed are the name of the school corporation, the number of years that the bonds will go out, and then the principal amount of the debt, the fees. Again, all this language has to be in there. And then we can put, we get to say, along with the auditor calculations, what the maximum amount of the levy will be and what the impact on a median residence will be. And that is really it. We cannot change the form of the ballot question. We do have some leeway, like here, insert a brief description of the project or purpose. We do have some leeway, but what I wanted you to know is that under state law, if we would ever need to be on a ballot, we come up with those blanks, working with the auditor, working with Baker Tilly and BCSC. But then we have to submit it to the DLGF, who reviews it to make sure that it is not leaning one way or the other. So we have a whole system of timing to make sure that we get a question certified and that the DLGF agrees with all of our blanks that we put in there. And then it goes through the county election board once we have that certification. So I wanted to make sure you knew, yes, if we ever needed to or had to, this is what as of today, this is what the form of the language would look like, but we have no control over anything except for those blanks.
I think specific to your question is, we don't get to write the question and we don't get to determine what goes into the question.
Just the blanks. And then that has to be certified.
That's a lengthy 2-sentence question. Is it 2 sentences? Looks like it.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's not even a question, right? Yeah. Okay.
And it is like, you'll see here too, one of the issues has been recently, this just changed last year, and I will be honest, it changes often, at least every other year.
Yes, it's possible that at the end of this, as of tomorrow, we may end up with a new question.
So, but one of the things that we work on, and this is where the auditor gets involved, is like median household value. Like in my community where I live, the median was 174, but we have to round that up to the next 50,000 as well. So this is very state law specific in what's in the form of the question. Any questions on that? The other things I just wanted to bring up, because this has been a misconception as well, because there was a trailer bill last year that allowed certain schools to go in November of 25. Going forward, the only time we can be on the ballot is in November of even years. I just wanted you to know that because of the misconceptions that are out there. It used to be that we could go in May or November of any year, even at a special election, but now it's only November of even years general. Any questions so far?
The second half of the presentation is going to be dealing with numbers, and so I'm Jason Cancel with Baker Tilly. I serve as the school corporation's municipal advisor, and we assist the school with long-term financial planning and debt issuance planning. And so, as Dr. Hempsel mentioned,
If I could just clarify one thing. I know that the county commissioners have done some studies with Baker Tilly. They are two separate pieces. Jason works for the school division and doesn't have any insight or knowledge of the county finances, and the person who represents the county commissioners has information about the county and doesn't work in school finance and doesn't have anything related to us. So I just want to point out that separation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Still adjacent.
I work only.
I just want to clarify that difference for those people who are watching at home.
And I work only in the case management library space. And so, as Dr. Hensel mentioned, one of the questions we are tasked with answering is how much could the school corporation issue inside its current debt service levy without increasing it. And so this is just an illustrative financing where looking at a multi-year capital improvement plan of the amount of borrowing based upon certain interest rates that the school corporation could issue without increasing its debt service levy above 2026 levels. So again, you'll see that this is a 3-year program from 2026 through 2028 that can change and would change depending upon project scope and timing, and those items potentially become more clear and focused. But just for today's purposes, again, you'll see the breakdown of 40 million, 80 million, and 40 million over a 3-year program. Maximum repayment term in Indiana for a school corporation is not to exceed 20 years. So you will see each one of these issuances would be less than 20 years. And based upon an interest rate that was, we had worked with the school corporation in the fall, and we used an interest rate current plus some inflationary factors of 50 basis points or 0.5%. And so based upon that interest rate, you would see interest costs there in total of $91.3 million. That interest rate assumption is approximately 4.63%. Interest rates today are roughly 4% for a 20-year financing. And so again, that could change depending upon where we're able to maybe even enter the market. It could work in our favor, it could also work against us. But just wanted to point out when we have no control of the interest rate, and we have just tried to be conservative with interest rate estimates.
The other thing that you'll notice on here is it's divided into 3 sections. Whenever we do any bonding, we would get approval for the total amount, but we would only bond in the sections that we need for the construction that's happening at that time. So what we were estimated from Gibraltar, as you recall, was about a 2.5 to 3-year process. So we would do the first part when we were first doing this for the school board for illustrative purposes, we were hopeful that we could break ground by the summer of 26. So what was the work that we could do in the second half of 26? What was the work we could do during the 27 calendar year? And then what would be done as we finished up the project in 28? So that's how you came up with the 3 amounts, but it's not to exceed the maximum amount that you got approval for at the very beginning of the process. Hopefully I said all that correctly. But I wanted to explain why it was divided into 3 years. And the reason it says 26 as the starting point was because this is what we showed our school board back in the fall when we were hopeful that we could break ground in 26.
What is there a treasury yield or something that the bond rate follows?
The municipal bond market does not follow the treasury yield. It's not like they cut treasury, so we automatically get an increase in the municipal bond market. There is a correlation, but it's not, obviously it's still not the same. But the treasury, I think the 10-year treasury is just over 4%, and ours is 20 years actually at 4% with some tax exempt financing assumed. So it does not follow it, basis point by basis point, but there is a correlation.
And then the 50 bip cushion is that pretty conservative at this point? Because I feel like we're in a declining rate environment.
I don't know if it's overly conservative, we wanted to provide context that today's rates are about 4% and a little bit of cushion just to know this range.
To your point though, even though the Fed funds rate continues to drop, it really hasn't had much impact on longer term treasuries and munis, correct? So even though we've seen Fed funds,
the
municipal
bond market has been relatively stable over the last 2 years.
One thing I also wanted to point out in case it comes up, again, schools are different in their statutes in that we can only go out 20 years on each bond issue, where other units could go out longer.
What about a county?
So I believe, and I would have to check with our
We'll
lawyers.
get to that.
I know, it depends on the financing side too, 30 years.
The last 2 rows here of our summary table are just the fact that the school corporation's 2026 debt service levy, which is the dollar requests by the school to the community to make its debt service payments as they stand today, is just under $13 million at $12,990,000. And we would not be estimating an increase to that levy amount. Obviously, assessed values could trend one way, up or lower, but the levy amount, the dollar request from the community would not change in this scenario. Are there any questions?
So we purposely, the board asked to make sure that that last row was a zero in terms of trying to determine what was the amount we could do.
Sure.
Are underwriter fees included? Where do underwriter fees fall into all of that?
Sure. So the assumed borrowing amount in total would be 160 million. And so we can provide you a breakdown of what estimated fees might look like, but there would be cost of issuance fees that would include underwriter discount, municipal advisor fees, bond counsel fees, so on, rating fees.
If we went out with the project approval for 160 million, it has to be all in hard cost, soft cost, and
Okay.
cost of issuance.
Okay, but anything over that is really what I think what I was trying to ask. Is there anything above and beyond that? But
We
that's
wouldn't be able
That's
to.
factored in.
That's the full.
And when those are issued, is there any debt service like escrow reserve requirement or replacement reserve requirement that's on top of the debt service?
Not for a school corporation.
That's nice.
One question, and Dr. Himpton, Dunn, if you want to hop in on this. When I see maximum debt service, if I'm an individual and I max out my maximum debt service as an individual household, that means I tend to think of that as you're pretty well tapped out on you're taking out the maximum amount of debt that you could possibly have. And that would mean, right, from my background as a financial planner, I would say, oh, that makes me a little nervous. Can you talk about, you could, again, at the current rate, that's what you could do, but can you talk about, that's not the max that you could do.
What you'll find is you'll find examples that were going to be shared that are over $1 on their debt service rate. What we were tasked with was to find out what could we do inside what our current rate and our current levy is. Anything that we would do above this would cause us to increase the levy or increase the rate. And that means raising taxes. We've been tasked with what could you do without raising taxes, and that's what this was for. If we wanted to do more upfront and get it done faster, we would need to increase our levy, which means we didn't increase our taxes. And at this point, that's not the direction our board has asked us to come back with illustrative examples of that. But there are school districts, I think you're going to have in your example, that are over $1 on their debt service rate. Now, obviously, if you're going to do that, you're forced in a referendum because of what Kristen just shared, which is that if you're 70 cents or higher, you have no choice but to go for a referendum at that point. And that's for any project. So if we are at 70 cents and we just wanted to do a simple $600,000 chiller replacement, we'd have to go to the public with a referendum for the $600,000 request if we were up to 70 cents or higher. So one of the things that Don and I have been trying to do is to manage our rate and keep it as low as possible so that when we do have emergencies, we have flexibility to go in and take care of those.
But I think that's the question though. If you're maxing out your existing 0.2424, can you comfortably make the $13 million payment and then still have money to fund emergencies?
The answer is yes, we can, and there's still things with general obligation bonds and so forth, but it would increase the tax rate in order to do those things.
Are GO bonds outside of this?
No. So schools do have the option to do a GO or a lease. I didn't delve into the differences because what Jason's focused on is the debt service levy, and both GOs and leases hit the levy the same.
Good questions.
Yeah, very good.
The other thing that happens is as assessed value goes up, we have more flexibility on what to do with those rates. So in year one, it would make us a little bit tighter to stay within that if we had an emergency come up, but over time, as assessed value goes up, there becomes more and more flexibility to come back and be able to do those projects.
We didn't want to make any assessed value assumptions in our presentation. We're strictly focused on levy. To Dr. Himpton's point, that could fluctuate. This works for this one. All right. So here, this is, I think, getting to the heart of the analysis. We have a couple of different color of bars here in this chart that are stacked upon one another. Want to just draw your attention to the gray bars. That is the current existing payments of the school corporation. Currently, the school has 6 bonds currently outstanding. You can see that that's roughly $14 million in 2026, which was driving that $13 million levy. All debt is repaid by 2031. And so the school corporation has been careful to repay debt quickly to minimize interest expense, to keep flexibility for the future, having an eye on potential projects. And you can see then, looking at the 2026 bonds, 2027 bonds, 2028 bonds, and different variations of blue, stacking them upon one another, you can see the 26 bonds, we bring that total payment to 14 million. It goes out to the full 20 years to 2045. The 80 million, again, that would come on in 2020, be issued in 2027, and would hit our tax rolls in 2028. Again, you can see payments there just under $14 million, and those payments would not be changing for the next 20 years at this debt service levy amount. So you can see,
and assuming that the EV stays, everything was just all same basic
yeah,
assumptions.
because this is focused strictly on levy. That's not the tax rate, the dotted line. That's just our projection for the levy. That's that $12,990,000. You can see the payments just correlate to it. Again, just pointing out that these are full 20-year terms. So this does, to answer your question, would there be anything above and beyond this if we were to stick to the $12,990,000? The answer would be no. If the interest rates were to be this 4.6%, you would see that this would just drive our levy to that $12,990,000 each and every year for the next 20 years.
Jason, how does including things like early call provisions, sinking funds, extraordinary calls, how does adding features like that affect the interest rate that we could issue at?
Sure. So typically for a 20-year financing, it's normal to have a 10-year call. And when we think about municipal bonds, these are fixed rate securities. So it's not as easy as or as simple as when we can potentially refinance our homes if interest rates are just favorable. We have to wait to get to that call date in order to use tax exempt interest rates. So if we were to use a 10-year call, then the price on that bond would be a little bit lower after the call date for the chance that to actually call for investors. So those are considered when we get to the pricing. If the project were to be approved when we get to the pricing, we do look at those factors to make sure it's the most efficient for the school corporation. But the answer to your question is those types of provisions would decrease the price of the bonds for the school corporation, and the investors would demand a little bit more, so to speak, for some of those provisions. So any questions on this slide? Just again, you can see $160 million at this current levy. Anything above and beyond that, we increase to the levy.
So 2027 is the first year you can issue any.
Yeah, if we were to issue, well, what would happen is, if you go back to the previous example, this was bringing it on in 26, but there's always a lag time on when you see it on your tax rate. So it comes up on the 27, that's why you see it on here.
Right? If you issue in 26, it hits the rolls in 27, it hits the rolls in 28, so on and so forth.
That's where group one funding, that's kind of, so now I'll put the pieces together. So group one funding, ideally from the county, because
Community.
So from the community, so that you're freed up then to then do group two.
Yeah, the amount that this generates allows us to do the group 2 project. With the help of the Casino Foundation, one of the questions you asked is what happens if the county doesn't have the financing or can't help us? What we would have to do as a school board is we would have to back up and say, if we can't do both high schools and make sure that every high school kid in the county has access to these modernized facilities, because the county doesn't have the money to help us and we can't. Our capacity is, if you take this amount and you marry it with the Casino Foundation money, it would cause the school board to take a step back and say, do we do the new high school on the east side and wait and put off the group 2 projects? Or do they stick with their original plan of doing the group 2 projects and put off and wait on doing the new high school on the east side? I don't know where the board is on that because we haven't had that conversation. But the answer to your question that you asked the other day, which is what happens if the county can't help, or if they can help but they choose not to help, what is the next step? The next step would be for the school board to take a step back and say, If we can't do this for all high school kids throughout the entire community, and we have to pick and choose only one project, that's what they would have to step back and take a chance on and say, do we just stick with our original game plan of this financing, live within our current rate, our current levy, and then make a decision as to which side of the river gets the opportunity. And that's what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to do this so that every kid in our county has access to modernized high school facilities. That's why we're asking the county to help if they have the opportunity, and if they have the opportunity and they have the willingness. Because then we're not picking and choosing kids across the state, across the county for modernized facilities. We can do both high schools at the same time. Every child in this county will have access to modernized facilities.
We also know there was a request to have some comparison data of where Beaver County Schools compares to its peers. And before we start getting into peer comparison, we did just want to provide a 5-year history of where the school corporation's tax rate has been from 2022 to 2026. You can see it's been very stable at that 98 to 97 cent range. Then in 2026, just this year, that actually dropped by roughly 7 cents. So the school corporation, dropped its referendum rate to 12 cents. It has the authority to go to 16 cents based upon the question that was approved back in 2019. But 12 cents is the operating referendum rate this year in 2026.
And to let you know, we dropped that rate to match the original request of the levy. So we're still generating the same levy we did at the beginning. It's just that we lowered the rate to do that. And we lowered the rate to do that in order to make sure that we could do the project of Group 2 projects and at the same time lower the overall rate.
And there was AV growth in Beaver County in 2026. So that did help contribute.
Yes.
AV grew over 10% in the county in 2026.
Which has not happened.
Has not, exactly.
Which, to clarify, and this is, Jason may be able to speak to this in more authoritative terms, but in a school corporation, we basically, when we build our budget, we ask for permission, and there's formulas we follow and so forth that tell us what the maximum amount is. If the AV grows, we don't generate more money. We actually see our rate lower because we can't receive more on a levy than what the formulas and the statutes allow us to do. And we have to get permission to that, and we have to prove that those are needed and so forth. So when there's assessed value growth, I know that there was some things going through the community with, oh, you guys are going to see a windfall. Actually, we don't. What we see is the exact same amount that we had permission to collect, which then causes the rate to go down.
But you had permission to collect more.
We have permission to collect more, but because of circuit breaker losses, those are credits back to the taxpayer. We don't get to collect those.
But on the operating referendum side, you chose not to take what you're
On the operation referendum side, you're correct. We had permission to collect an additional $2 million on the operational referendum side that we chose not to because we wanted to offset it with what we were doing in the debt service so that we could do the Group 2 projects and at the same time lower the rate.
Jason, how common is that?
It's not very common to drop the rate by 7 cents.
Was that a school board decision? Was that a school
It was a
board meeting?
community decision. We reached out to some community members that pay attention closely to property taxes, as well as the school board, and made a decision that we thought was in the best interest of the entire community, but also make sure that we could do what the board had as its goals.
There's a lot of different strategies the schools, adopt that are specific to what works for them and their communities.
We did get our maximum rate in the operations fund.
Exactly.
So we didn't give up any of our operations fund revenue. We did take that, and that's governed by the growth quotient. So that was that 4% growth quotient that you heard Steve will talk about. So we did get the 4% maximum rate growth in operations. The only fund that we gave up revenue was referendum.
Yes, and that is what I think would be a little unique, just lowering it to that levy amount, knowing you could have had the 16 cent rate and the school chose to be at the 12 cent rate. That is a little unique.
I can tell you that the reason was because what we dropped, it was about 4 cents. And if you add the 4 cents back in there, that would have been around 94 cents, 94 to 95 cents. And at the time, there was a appeal and a review being done of the assessed valuation. And we wanted to make sure that if that appeal ended up reducing the amount of the assessed valuation growth, that we ended up with the rate going down. And so we chose to reduce our levy in the operation or in the referendum back to the original levy amount to guarantee that even if that review ended up with a slightly lower AV than what they were projecting at the time, we were going to end up with a lower rate in either case. And it ended up that the AV held higher than what we thought it might. And so we ended up with even a lower rate than what we thought. But we did that because we wanted to, it was based on conversations that we've had with farmers in particular, but people who pay close attention to property taxes and pay very significant in those property taxes.
Yeah, it's commendable, but I guess $2 million spread across the AV, I just don't know how impactful it was to the individual taxpayer. So.
Understand your question.
I know there's a lot of colors on this slide, but realistically, I really just want to draw your attention to the totals. This is a peer comparison of school corporations with 2026 enrollment ranging between 8,500 and 15,900, or just under 16,000. Also including some that don't quite fit that enrollment category, but they would be MSD Decatur, Plainfield, Mooresville are also in this peer comparison as well. You can see that that's 29 in this universe that we are comparing to, and that we can see Vigo County there. We tried to highlight it in yellow. It's at 90.53 cents. The dotted line that you see, that is the average tax rate in 2026 throughout the state, and that is $1.02. So you are below the average tax rate in the state. The median it would be 99 cents, and so the median being 99, the average being $1.02. Vigo County, you can see, is below that at 90. The different colors in the bars just represent that there are different property tax levy funds, some applicable to some schools, like a capital referendum, for example. That's not applicable to Vigo County schools. We don't have a capital referendum. We have an operating referendum. So again, you can see the operations fund, that's in the green, debt is in blue, capital referendum, baby blue, operating referendum, yellow. Are there any questions on this slide?
So like right at half have an operating referendum, it looks like 15 out of 30?
No.
15 out of 29?
Yes, I want to double check my numbers. It's not, I wrote down 10, but for some reason I think it is more than that. I think 10 was the capital referendum.
10 was capital.
10 was
We talked
capital
about.
referendum. Thank you.
Yeah, there's 15.
And there's thank you, 15.
And if you, as you may have heard or read, there is a number of school districts that are having conversations about operational referendums that have never had that before because of what happened with SCA 1 as well as the general fund basic tuition funding from last year. I mean, our revenue from the state of Indiana and the basic tuition that we get from them is $1.5 million less than it was previously. And lots of school districts encountered that. And when you coupled it with the hit of SCA 1, there are other school districts that are not as in as strong a financial position as what we have been in. And so there's a lot of referendums that are going to go out in this next election. And I think a report that came out of Channel 15 out of Fort Wayne, I think they reported more than 100 school districts were having conversations about doing operational referendums.
And the dotted line was statewide. It's not this.
Correct, that is the state. Okay. Our next slide looks at drilling down further into the tax rate composition of non-exempt debt service. So this is not capital referendum debt service. This is just non-exempt, not voter referendum approved debt service. You can see again where Vigo County stacks up there at about 6th in our 29 peer comparison universe. The state average for the debt service fund tax rate is roughly 43 cents in 2026. So the school corporation here at 24 cents is, roughly 19 cents below that state average for the debt service fund tax rate. A lot of information on this slide. I do understand that. But these are the school corporations in the state that have operating referendums outstanding. So this is outside of the peer comparison universe of 29. You can see that Vigo County's operating referendum tax rate of 12 cents. Again, that ranks 7th amongst the state, and there are over 60 operating referendums on this chart. The average, as you can see there, the dotted line, that is roughly 24 to 25 cents for the operating referendum rate average. What does this mean though on a per student basis? Just thinking about the levy that we're generating, that $7 million, prorating that amongst the enrollment for Vigo County School, and also compared to the other schools that have operating referendums outstanding. You can see that that generates $539 per student for Vigo County Schools. That's $7 million over the roughly 13,000 that comprises the enrollment count for Vigo County Schools. So you can see some on the further end of the chart that essentially is saying that levy goes further for that student on the further end of the chart.
You'll notice that there are many of the highest numbers are rural communities, and the rural communities that are trying to avoid consolidation. And that's, another question that has been asked is, what if we were to keep all 23 schools? Well, in order for us to do all 23s, continue to utilize all current 23 schools and be able to live within our means, we would need to significantly increase what we've asked for in the operational referendum, because we would need to do something from the operation side in terms of what the impact of SCA 1 to make sure that we can preventively maintain our buildings. And we would need to increase what we're doing from what the state side and supplementing their side, because over the last 15 years, I think only 2 years out of the last 15 years, they have reached the funding rate with schools that keeps up with inflation. And so we just continue to fall behind that. So if we want to keep doing what we've been doing and not make any changes, the only way to do that is to significantly increase the operational referendum.
Sure.
And that's where you see those numbers on the right with those big numbers. Those are typically rural school districts that are trying to avoid consolidating with their neighbors so that they can keep doing what it is that they've been doing.
Is that Hamilton County all the way out there?
It is Hamilton
that's
Community.
I know
It is
it's
a lake
difficult.
community
Okay.
up in northern Indiana.
Then our final slide here is net assessed value per student. And just practically speaking, what we're getting behind what is the impact of this slide is just thinking about the same. We can't just raise the same amount of local property taxes as some taxing districts of other units just based upon our net assessed value. And so the state average of net assessed value per student is $512,000 for 2026, and you can see Vigo County Schools at $412,000, so about $100,000 underneath that. Again, that $512,000 number, that's all schools in the state, not just the 29 comparing to here.
But when your rates are lower and your NAV's lower, it kind of puts you in a little bit of a.
Which is the reason why the previous
Tough
slides were
position.
so much lower than the others.
Right.
Because our AV, because we have lower AV, a penny generates less than they do in some other communities. So when you combine both of those two, that's why in the previous slide you saw how much lower we were than some of the others.
So that was those were the 6 slides for peer comparison, and I'm happy to answer any questions pertaining to the financing or peer comparison. I do appreciate the opportunity to speak here.
Thank you. Very educational.
Yeah, great information. Take me back a little further. We talked about this the other day, but the 0.2424 debt service rate, talk about how that has trended over the last 20 years.
Sorry.
Historically, over the past 5 years, the school corporation's debt service tax rate has been in the low 20s. It's been 21 cents, 22 cents. Now we're at 24. And so for the school corporation, that has been consistent over the last 5+ years. But this is the 24 cents, a little bit higher than it has been, as Dr. Hensel alluded to, with thinking about project based.
And that's part of the reason why to increase it to the 24, so we could do the group 2 projects. We lowered the other ones, but the overall net was a lower rate. Understood that we didn't have to, but the board chose to.
I said it, I'm done.
Our tax rate has been extremely consistent over the last 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
I think I have
other
a,
than the operating referendum. If you take the operating referendum out.
I think I had a slide that I did for the community forum back in March that showed the history of the tax rates. And I think that the debt service tax rate is pretty level for like 30 years.
That's in my comparison, I believe, when we do the financial review, because we do circuit breaker laws.
Please don't
History
hold me
tax
to
rate.
that. Hold it to what she says when she does her presentation, but it was for a very long period of time that it was very, very stable.
Questions?
I will.
Kristen, I failed to take a note. You said there are 2 reasons for a referendum. Any project when your existing debt service rate exceeds 70 cents. What was the other one? Increasing the debt service rate?
The other one, so it's, number one is if your debt service fund tax rate is over 70 cents as a district. The other one, while you see a lot, most of the referendum we've seen that are capital is because they have so much circuit breaker loss in those communities that they have to go, when you do a referendum, your debt is outside circuit breaker cap, so it's an automatic tax increase.
Okay.
And so that's why some schools have to do it, because they suffer so much circuit breaker loss. They're getting a huge hit on their operations fund already, issuing more debt. They would have to take more from the operations fund and they couldn't do it.
And remember, our loss is almost 9 million. It was in 25.
Very good. Wonderful.
I think what we've done is we've presented to you kind of the process we went through. We started with the enrollment realities. We went into some budget realities. We talked through how we worked our way through different options that were there. Jim presented to you where the deficiencies are in our buildings. We've talked a little bit now about the financing and what the parameters were for the financing and how we compare. What we'll do is put together for a future meeting date kind of a summary and tie all those things together, so you're not relying on your notes and remembering pieces that we've done. We'll try to do that in a summary. You guys have also asked us for a little bit more on our current financial condition. Donna is doing a presentation at an upcoming board meeting where she takes a look back as to what we did in 2025. We will share that at a future oversight board meeting as well. We're going to share it at our school board meeting first, and then at an oversight board meeting. Her target date has been based on that board meeting date. So, and I think we're going to do it within a couple days of each other. So we'll be at about the same time. So I think from that standpoint, if there's anything else that we can answer for you to help you understand how we navigated this, we're happy to do more school tours, to go and view some of the options that other kids and other communities have that kind of help us understand how we need to modernize our schools so that our kids have access to opportunities that other communities take for granted. We understand the concept of living within our means, which is the reason why we've also tried to choose an option that helps us reduce what we're doing in the education fund, because that revenue comes from the state of Indiana. We're not in control of it. And how do we also reduce operation fund expenses and come up with the least amount that we need to do for these different projects, so that we can maximize all that and be as cognizant as we are with the taxpayer, but also provide opportunities for kids. So how do we maximize savings and do it as cheaply as we can, but also not shortchange what we're doing for kids?
Sure.
And making sure that we're meeting the needs of kids. And that's what we've been trying to do. So if any of those tours you want to come up with, if any of those follow-up information, we're happy to do so. But I think we've concluded with answering those questions, and we'll put together kind of a summary and kind of do that overview summary at a future board meeting that Mark's been working with me on a potential date.
Correct.
So we've got that done.
I think it'd be interesting to see, that we've kind of outlined a 29 group, kind of peer group, to see how many facilities, how many high schools they have, how many middle schools, how many elementaries, and how does that compare to our current state and option 6. If you're able to-
And that's where we went when we came back with that model where we said we want to get between 600 and 700 of an elementary school and around 900 to 1,000 in a middle school. That was based on what you just said, which is where does that peer group land and what are other schools doing to try to increase their efficiencies and maximize those efficiencies? And that's what drove that part of the conversation.
Sure.
You'll also notice that we didn't do the amounts that were done, but there were schools up there in that peer group that have $800, $900 million referendums that they passed. I think there was one that was up there that was over $1 billion, if I'm not mistaken, that you've had or close to it. There are the bottom line is that there are communities that have invested in their schools for a long period of time, which is why you saw the larger debt service rates. You saw the capital referendum rates and so forth, is because they've been doing that. And all we're trying to do is to bring our schools up to a situation where our kids get access to the same types of learning opportunities that other schools take for granted, because our kids can compete with anyone, anywhere, and we want them to stay in Vigo County and pursue those options here in Vigo County.
Great. Any public comment, or I guess anything else from the board before we move to public comment?
Thank you, guys.
Public comment?
I've been to a number of these meetings and tried to absorb a lot of this information. And it seems to me we're looking at the total cost, today's dollars, of all these projects, $500, $600 million.
If we were to keep all 23 schools and not make any changes to what we're doing, it is over 700, and what we're trying to do is reduce that number down, but you're in the ballpark.
So we're not kicking a can down the road. We're trying to catch a barrel that's rolling down the road on its own and slow it down. Okay, I mean, let's face the facts, how serious this is and how much money is ultimately going to be needed to do all of this. Now, I know COVID had a horrible impact on construction costs and significantly increased construction costs. I mean, I've seen it as I dealt with Ray Park and hear it and read it, and that's actually added to the problem we have here. From an individual taxpayer perspective, about this time of year, they get their notice of assessment on their home, and how much it's gone up is what I expected to see. And then the only other thing they see is their property tax bill. Okay, and I'm gonna hazard a guess that maybe 75% of our homeowners are not gonna be able to read that referendum wording, required referendum wording, and understand what it's gonna mean. Which that makes it so easy to vote no. So is there a marketing process to let people know that own their home, this is what this is going to mean to your house, and not just a $50,000 assessed valuation or whatever? I mean, I realize it may be a significant amount of work, but I think in the last referendum, I don't think people really understood how little their property taxes were going to go up if they voted for it.
Obviously, I wasn't here during the last referendum, and I can't speak to how things were done in the last referendum, but one of the positions that our school board has taken and what we've done is the community told us they did not want what was presented the last time. That was the result of the vote. There's a number of reasons as to why. So what we did this time is in our facility study is we took a look at all of our buildings. We tried to look at it from the standpoint of what are the current laws, what is the direction of those laws and the trends of those laws, and put ourselves in the best position, not just for the immediate today, but for the next 10, 12, 15, 20 years. And that's what we've tried to do. In terms of passing a referendum, you're correct in that it's a lot of education of getting information out to people. We've been talking about this, Donna, for what, 18, almost 24 months now. Actually, we're over 24 months now since we first started the facility study. We're over 24 months. And we still have people who come up to us and said, I didn't know you guys were doing that.
Well,
Which
and
is why we're thankful.
I go back
for what
even
you're
further
doing.
than that, that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
But I will say to your question about normally when a school enters a referendum race, they engage a consulting firm that works side by side with them in a public relations capacity to run that race. And obviously there are a lot of rules that govern how that occurs, because once the school board makes that determination that we're going to actually run a referendum race, a lot of things have to stop at the school corporation level. Only certain people at the corporation, and I believe it's the superintendent and the CFO, that can actually work on school time to promote the referendum. And during the last referendum, we had calculators out there, property tax calculators that people could go out and enter data. But you are so correct. People do not understand. I don't think that people understand the process of their tax bill and what all those things mean. But if they went out to that calculator, they could input their net assessed value and it would produce what they're.
Somebody needs to do it for them.
That's,
Yeah.
and I know,
That's my
and I
point.
know what
Somebody
you're
needs to do it
saying.
for 'em. If we can go door to door and promote candidates for political office, maybe we can go door to door and deal with this issue. Because if we can't tell them this is your pre-taxes and this is your post-taxes with this referendum, those are the only two numbers that they're gonna,
I
that are
agree
gonna
with you. I
matter.
totally agree with you. It is a big job. And we did have a PAC, a political action committee that worked with us, but obviously it wasn't enough.
So
And
if
we learned a lot. We
you
learned
need a lot more help and you need more people to do it, then speak up. Right, Kristen?
Yep.
Speak up to that piece if we ever.
And Kristen
If we get
did have a group. I mean, there was help, but it obviously we fell short.
Yeah, and I think we've heard a lot of different voices coming to the table for what we're discussing now versus last time. And so I think Earl is exactly right. It's going to take a lot of people and a lot of education to get out there and make people understand exactly what this means, because this is not a small thing. This is a very big, very long-term thing.
But to your point, and all of you are correct, and thank you. Thank you actually for advocating in the ways that you're doing so. But what our school board tasked us to do is what could we do inside our existing levies? And our county commissioner said, what could they do inside their existing levies?
Sure.
And what we're trying to do is how much of this could we do inside existing levies? And is there a way to address a chunk of this that takes care of the entire population inside those existing levies? And that's what we're able to do at the high schools. But Earl, you are correct in that to do the entire total plan, we can't do it inside the existing levies, and we can't do it all at once. It's going to be spread out over several years. But your point
and I struggle with what the sources of funds are gonna be for the total project.
Right.
And the other piece is the other private money that can come into this process. And it seems like we need to get rolling on trying to build that.
But if the county does have the resources that the commissioners have expressed, which is the reason why you guys are hiring Crow to do an independent type of thing. What we can do in our existing levies and what they think they can do in their existing levies takes off a very big, significant chunk of this and greatly reduces how much we would need to raise in addition to do those remaining parts.
We can use the private money regardless
Correct.
of what happens.
Well, and I think it's to everyone's benefit and interest to see the operational efficiencies that you laid out over a month ago. If we can, the long-term efficiencies and savings over $14 million a year. Yes, it's gonna take a capital investment up front, but there is light at the end of the tunnel and then it's not a continual ask for money, we can actually start saving money operationally at the end of it.
I think that the real effort too was that if we could get a big chunk done and do what we said we were going to do and establish that momentum in the county and hopefully help the chamber bring in outside businesses and the county, people could see it improving, then we get momentum that would push us through.
We understand that one of the things that we're trying to overcome in terms of the trust factor that's been out there is that some of the projects that we have done have not addressed the underlying issues.
Sure.
And so for an example being Rio Grande Elementary School was formerly an open concept school that they came in and put walls, but there were also HVAC issues that needed to be addressed. We put the walls up and we did not address the HVAC issues, which created cold spots and hot spots in the building, and the building is completely dysregulated in terms of the heating and cooling. And you can have two rooms next to each other where one room is 62 degrees and the other room is 75 degrees. And the reason is because in the open concept, the HVAC was designed to circulate the air without those walls being present.
Sure.
And now those walls are being put back in there. We understand that that's an issue, and we understand that we need to complete some of these projects to demonstrate that we're not just trying to make them look nice, we're trying to address the core issues that really affect teaching and learning. And those electrical systems are a key component of this. Those plumbing systems are a key component of this.
And I enjoy the conversation of meeting in this room. It makes it a lot more collaborative than the council chambers. So just remind everybody, it's public comment. There's no obligation from you all to respond. It's not public Q&A.
I appreciate the
You've
comment.
been gracious.
I appreciate that. I think we've got a question behind you.
Sure.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning to all of you. To all committee members, Dr. Hensel, everyone in attendance. My name is Minister Dwayne Malone. I am a lifelong resident of Vigo County, and I am employed within the school corporation. I'm just going to read this statement to you so I can just then take me off of anything. I am here today at the encouragement of God's Holy Spirit to speak to you about the concerns we have in the Black community regarding these new schools. My first concern comes at the formation of this committee with no African American representation. I was informed, and I was glad to hear from Mr. Matheny, his name correct, of the process to be selected. And this was the first time I've heard of this selection process to be on this committee. My second concern was Mr. Matheny was the times of your meetings for all to engage in this process. I was elated to hear from him on the phone when he and I spoke, and also to hear today that you will be having some evening meetings so that other people can come and engage in this process in our community. My third concern is the options created for new schools in Vigo County. In your six options, West Vigo High School was made to stand alone. My question is, why is this? There are no options with north standing nor south alone, only in your options to renovate all three high schools. Our option is to consolidate West Vigo and north and expand the boundaries for south. Consolidate West Vigo and south and expand the boundaries for north. These were some of the things that we thought because of the options it provides for our students. Not only was this committee formulated to find the best fiscal resolve for our community, but was also consolidated for the best interest of the people and our concerns. These efforts being made now seem politically motivated with little community insight. Building one new high school and renovating West Vigo may not create the best conducive atmosphere for students needing to transfer schools for numerous reasons, especially our Black students. With the hysterical racial incidents and redacted statements to help solve those issues, may not be the best alternative for African American students. Creating options that would not violate any civil rights for all students is also important. The speculation that one high school will allow for more academic options for students, and that's a great option. We're definitely happy for the academic options that this would create. But this would also eliminate sporting opportunities and other extracurricular activities for our students. Black student athletes strive in athletics and would eliminate many of these opportunities with one high school. But again, I do like having more academic opportunities for our students. I hope we can tell more truth in our history books about American history, since we're looking at creating these other options for academics. There's a great need to hire more Black teachers and administrators in the Vigo County School Corporation. A great need to reduce the suspension rate of Black students, train more teachers and administrators on racial bias training. Brown versus Board of Education was only 72 years ago. Unfortunately, we still have some of these mindsets in our schools today that we need change, especially as far as moving forward in creating new schools and building new schools. It's not only on the outside and what our schools are looking like, but what's going on the inside. If not, we must be willing to create other educational outlets for our students in Vigo County. We don't want that to be the issue, but we just want to be included, and our voice heard it in these changes. We know we need new schools. We know we do, but we're not included. We just ask to be included in the process so that our voices are heard. Because I've heard many times today about how important this process is, and it is. We're talking about children. And I don't see everybody at the table or everybody's voice being included. And that's all I'm having here today, is to raise those concerns. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Just quick, kind of sort of along the same lines, a question or comment with potential referendum, and something to maybe consider in the future when you see how far it can go within the existing tax structure. That's fantastic, and partnering, I love all those things. I wonder when it gets to that point of how much is going to be needed for that referendum, if polling something like that in the county would be possible. I agree that education and things like that can move the needle. With as bad as it was defeated last time, I don't know that simple education is enough to move it that far, unfortunately. I lament that fact, but I think that might be true.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Kyle Kershaw.
If I could just make one other comment.
Sure.
Because it seems as we're moving in a direction to do this without a referendum. Is that correct? Kind of land this out for the community so we don't have to raise taxpayers' dollars. But what about creating something that the taxpayers wouldn't mind paying for? We thought about it that way. What do the taxpayers want? I know we said no, but we're talking about creating something that everybody can live with. I don't think so far that everybody's willing to live with one big new high school. I don't know. I know from my community that's not the case. But what can we create that everybody can get on board with, and we can get a referendum done, and we can get public money, we can get school corporations money, and everybody will be pleased. Everyone does. So where are these ideas that everybody, the whole corporation is pleased, and this is not a political windfield that we can go at it this way. We know, Vigo County knows we need new schools. We got to get everybody on board. And that's creating options that everyone can live with. And I think people in Vigo County would have no, even our farmers. That's just my opinion. Thank you again for it.
Yeah. No, good comment there. Appreciate it. Anything else? Motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Heather. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you, everybody. That's warm in here.
It is.
Thank you.
Me too.